If you don't have these traits, you absolutely cannot play for Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs, because we're talking about Kirby Smart's non-negotiables. We're talking about the qualities and traits that you have to have if you want to play for the University of Georgia. He talked about that with, I believe, CBS's Josh Pate earlier this spring, and there were some quotes in that interview that I guess you could watch on CBS Sports somewhere that I found really, really interesting, because there are so many players in the transfer portal. It's not necessarily a revolving door at Georgia like it is at other places, but there's so many new faces. And he was asked, how do you keep the standard, with guys that you recruit out of high school, guys that you recruit in the portal, with so many new faces? How do you keep the standard, as Kirby Smart likes to say all the time? And he talks about his non-negotiable stuff that is, if you don't have it, you can't play at Georgia. You're not even going to get recruited. But stuff that you absolutely have to have if you want to win over the staff, play, start, and have a big-time career at Georgia. He said, quote, "My non-negotiables are effort and toughness and DNA qualities. That's what we look for. That's a non-negotiable. If you don't have those qualities, you are not going to play. My job is to explain to a young man why those values are important and why they have to happen. I see it every year." And he goes on to talk about how long it takes for guys, because even the transfers, as good as they are, it still takes time for them to get how to play at the University of Georgia, how to practice to a standard, how to play to a standard, how to lift and work out, how to do stuff on your own when you have time, right? To build chemistry. If you're a wide receiver, sometimes you have to stay late with the quarterback, right? If you're an offensive lineman, you have to gel and have that chemistry. And it's led to a lot of success. So Kirby knows what he's doing, and not everyone can play for him. And I get questions all the time. Why is Georgia not recruiting this 5-star? Why did they not why they let this impressive kid from the state of Georgia leave to go somewhere else? Why didn't they go after this kid in the transfer portal? There could be a lot of reasons behind that that's not related to talent, right? Georgia dropped a guy who I believe was the number one tight end in the 2026 class, dropped him completely off their board because he didn't fit what they were looking for in a person, right? Super talented kid, but he didn't fit the Georgia culture. That's what they thought. So they dropped him. He's committed elsewhere. But that happens all the time, right? Just because you are an incredibly talented player, maybe one of the best in the country, doesn't mean you're a fit at Georgia. And, this is a reason why we see a lot of 3-stars, Jordan Davis, Ladd McConkey, Javon Bullard, so on, do really well at a place like Georgia, because they have that fire and energy and that toughness that he's talking about, those special DNA traits where, again, you love football, you live and you breathe it, and you may not be the fastest, you may not be the tallest or the biggest or the strongest, but you've got those innate football qualities, right? And effort and toughness go a long way at Georgia. If you don't give 100% in every single rep in practice, you're not earning a starting job. And if the guy behind you, maybe he's younger, if he's showing that and he's tougher than you and he's given more of a max effort mentality than you at practice, you're getting passed, right? And often, it happens, and those kids end up leaving and hitting the portal, and it doesn't matter, right? If you're not playing, you're not hurting the team by leaving. And if you're Kirby Smart, you're like, okay, see you later, right? You didn't have that effort, that toughness. You can't play here if you don't have that type of stuff. Here's what else he had to say. He said, "It takes 2 years for a guy to be completely ready to play, as far as toughness, importance to the program, attention to detail, focus, being able to sustain practice, being strong enough in the weight room. It takes 2 years." And he said, we don't have 2 years for a lot of guys, right? They come in and we need them to play immediately. And he goes on to say, we have to have guys that are not ready enough to play more than our opponents. He said, quote, "We don't have 2 years. We have to speed that up, but we can't. You have to be prepared to play with kids who may not be ready. You have to have yours more prepared and ready than your opponent. And every once in a while, a special player comes along, like a Malachi Starks or a Nate Frazier, KJ Bolden, guys who play a lot as a freshman. Brock Bowers was as special as it gets. I mean, that guy led the team in catches in his very first game against Clemson in 2021. It's not ideal to throw freshmen out there, and you don't want to. I think in an ideal, perfect world, Malachi Starks was a backup that year, because you had guys who were already there making plays, who who are around the program. You didn't have to throw a freshman in there and hope that he's not going to make mistake after mistake. Now, Malachi Starks was special, and KJ Bolden, I think, is a special player too. So they earned it. But at the same time, Kirby's saying, hey, it really does take 2 years for you to be fully ready to play at this level, at this program. And he uses that on the recruiting trail, and he tells guys, hey, you can play early at Georgia. That's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to keep you on the bench. If you earn it and show that toughness and that effort that are non-negotiables, you are able to play as a freshman. Now, it's still not an ideal situation because, as he said multiple times in that interview, it takes 2 years. Guys still make it. And then at 21 season, even in 22, you saw some occasional freshmen play. Brock Bowers obviously in 21, but that group was led by seasoned, veteran, experienced players who played hard, right? Especially that 21 defense, man. They had all the effort you could ask for and all the toughness and those innate DNA traits, right? Talking about Nakobe Dean and Nolan Smith and Lewis Seen had that. Christopher Smith, Keely Ringo, right? Those guys had that, and that's why they won Kirby Smart over. In the 22-23 teams, Kamari Lassiter, who was like a low to mid 4-star, Javon Bullard, a 3-star. Those guys played better than their ranking and outperformed all the expectations for them because they had those traits. Dejan Edwards, a guy that, Del McGee liked and they signed kind of late in the process. He wasn't some highly regarded player, but he outplayed his ranking. And I think Kenny McIntosh did too because they had those qualities. That's what they look for on the recruiting trail. And so when they do land a 3-star, right, a lot of times that 3-star, gives it his best shot. It's not working out and they transfer. But a reason why Georgia went after them and signed them is because they have the traits that they're looking for. Again, they may not be have the length. Although at cornerback, I know you have to have length and you have to be able to run, right? So there are little instances and non-negotiables specific to position groups. But as a whole, if you want to play for the Dogs, you have to be a max effort type of guy, and you have to be tough, right? He talks about all the time, if you make a mistake, that's fine. Just make sure you learn from it. Still give max effort. Don't, hang your head, right? You got to be tough, not only physically, but mentally, because these practices are hard. And I've said it all the time when prospects and their parents come through and they watch a spring practice, they watch a fall practice, they're like, man, this is intense. And sometimes it drives prospects away with how hard and how intense practice is. Some guys love it. They eat it up, and Georgia climbs their list of schools on their recruitment because they love that type of intensity and fire and passion that not only Kirby gives during practice, but the players do too. But it can be an environment that pushes people away. And that's fine because that's not the right player that Kirby Smart wants in the program anyway, right? So it all works itself out. But Kirby Smart saying, hey, even in the transfer portal, I've got my non-negotiables, right? We're looking for tough kids who are smart, they're intelligent players, they give max effort and have those DNA traits that you just have to have, right? The loving football and loving practice and, the ability to wake up every day and say, how do I get better, right? Those guys play, and they play really well, and they go off to play in the NFL, and we see it over and over and over again. And sometimes it leads to a championship. Sometimes it's a national championship, as, at least over the past 5 years. Sometimes it's an SEC championship. But that's how you beat your rivals year in and year out, over and over and over again. You bring in these type of players that really care, right? On the practice field, on Saturdays in the fall, and every day as a student athlete and doing their best to improve as a football player. Those are the guys that he's looking for. And it's obviously worked out. They're one of, if not still the best program in the country. I think you can make a hard case. Ohio State is the best program in the country right now. They're obviously, reigning champs. But Georgia's got 2 out of 4 national championships. And we'll see. I think they have a real opportunity to make a run this year because they have a lot of these guys who have the non-negotiables, right? So again, you can be incredibly talented, and I think Georgia fans sometimes see, hey, why is this Georgia's not in on this 5-star, or they're not in on this really good player from the state? Why is that? Kirby Smart has no problem saying, hey, we've got our non-negotiables, and if you don't meet those qualities, you're not playing for us, and we're not recruiting you. And again, it has really, really worked out. I know Georgia took a step back last year, but that's on their mind too, and that's not going to change the way they recruit and the way they, address their needs in the transfer portal. They still have they're still looking for those type of kids, those type of qualities that these kids have to have if they want to play and succeed